Greetings, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Dreamscapes. Today we have our friend Todd Nyholm, and he is the creator of Nightality and the Healthy Life Ladder. We're going to throw it over to him in just a minute, but please like, share, subscribe, tell your friends. Always need more volunteer dreamers. You can get support my work with direct donations, get a t-shirt or a coffee mug at the Spring Store. Also, currently 12 volumes of historical dream literature reproduced by lovingly by yours truly, updated for modern English, highly footnoted. I always forget to tell people that. Enough about me. That's the housekeeping. And back to our friend Todd. I forgot to ask where you're at in the world, if it's okay to say.
Yeah, I live in Cheyenne, Wyoming.
Wyoming, nice.
Yeah,
that's
kind of in the middle of nowhere a bit. Yeah,
that's kind of my dream. I'm in my garage here in the heart of Portland, Oregon, but very much my own little space. That's very important to me. So I could see myself having this exact same space in a place where my nearest neighbor was 2 miles away, and it'd be the same to me.
I know what you mean. It's kind of similar for me.
Yeah, it's a necessity for people that spend a lot of time thinking. If you got too much noise and activity going on around you, if you don't have that comfortable, quiet space to kind of put your thoughts in order, or let them settle. I love analogies like that turbulent river. There's a waterfall and there's the still pond. And what do they say? The still ponds run deep, that kind of thing. Right. Less turbulence, more. Yeah, I'm rambling already. We were supposed to talk about you. Links in the description below. You can find Todd on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So let's tell our audience who you are, what you do, and all that good stuff.
Yeah. So my name is Todd, and I've been kind of on a mission to improve my life experience and my health since I was a kid. So I had some significant health problems and some crazy trauma when I was young, and I've been trying to sort that all out for myself. Because some of the doctors were helpful, many weren't. I went through 50 to really get some help with one specific doctor. But it also led me into looking into everything I could possibly find. So 4,000-year-old material about how to heal yourself, or if someone's working on something right now, anywhere, I'll read about it and I'll try to figure out how to incorporate it to help myself. And so over time, I feel much better now than I've ever felt before, like significantly. And a lot of that is the help I got, but also the methods that I put into my system, which I call the Nightality method. And I originally called it the Nyholm Vital Life method, which is too long. And one of my editors was like, why don't we shorten it? So I took the NY from my last name and made it Nightality. And that's where that comes from. So it kind of makes me smile. Kind of fun to have there.
I like that cleverness too. Yeah, it's definitely vitality, but it's your understanding of what helps create or inspire vitality. And so it's the Nightality method. And once again, for folks on the podcast side of things, NY Tality, like vitality, but with an NY for Todd Nyholm. Very, very easy to find there. So it seems like you've kind of distilled it down to what you call the Healthy Life Ladder. And it's got these 26 principles that are intended to achieve more conscious decision-making. What does that look like?
Yeah, so I've been trying to figure out how to put all these principles together in a package that people could use. And so for my second book, I made that as a chart so that people could kind of look at what they're trying to decide to do now and have these 26 principles to say, well, where does it match with me in terms of this principle? And what about this one? And so that all the decisions could be looked at not only now, but how will it affect you in 20 years and 40 years? And how many times are you trying to make a decision based on what someone else told you? Like someone was 5 and told you can't do this because you're a redhead like me. And that was something someone actually said to me.
Wow.
And 40 years later, you're like, hey, that doesnn't make any sense at all, and it's like floating like. So a lot of that stuff was like, how do you dig it out? And how do you make a method that just kind of like clicks you over and say, oh, that doesn't make any sense, or this is going to affect me this way. How does that go in 10 years? How would that go towards the end of my life? Would that be something that really matters to me when I'm 92? So maybe I shouldn't pursue it if it's only going to be good for 3 weeks, and maybe something else would make more sense. So those 26 principles, that was originally, I alphabeted it. I used it like A, B, C, D, E, and the editors weren't necessarily a fan of that. They're like, well, let's number it. So I changed it. They wanted me to make all the principles like have an A so it connected and have a B, but I couldn't change the principles enough to make the alphabet. And that's why there's 26. It fit in my mind really well. And it really connected to some of my studies in language, because I have a degree in languages and speak some languages, and it's fun for me. But that's why there's 26. It helps you remember a little bit, when you're trying to go through them. But yeah, it was kind of what I was trying to get at in that book in particular. So
that is the first thing I thought of, was like 26. Oh, like the letters of the alphabet. It's very nice. For me, I love clever things like that. There's such a thing as too clever or thinking you're cleverer than you are, but some things just fit it in this way where it's like, oh, that's perfect. But I've actually, as you were describing that, reminds me of after I'm done with about 4 or 5, 6 more books of historical dream literature, I might finally feel ready to focus on one of my own, which is actually going to be a adaptation or expansion of an older book of Aesop's Fables, which is kind of like, that was we're talking about 4,000-year-old wisdom. Aesop's Fables was kind of one of the first self-help books in a way. It's telling you all these stories of like, look what happens if you live like this. This is the kind of results you might or will probably get. Watch out for these foibles, these unvirtuous habits that cause damage to you and others, and better and worse ways of doing things. So that's kind of where I'm thinking of heading next. We'll see when I get there. But you cool. Not that you beat me to it necessarily, because we both got beat to it by thousands of years, but bringing that ancient wisdom into a modern form and letting people know it's been this way for a long time. These things don't appear to change based on modern circumstances. I love that kind of stuff. You can find a principle that's been correct for thousands of years, you're probably on the right track. So.
And it's worked all that time and in different cultures, different places. And we tend to like miss it for some reason. Like we think everything new is better somehow. And some things new are better and some things old are much better. And it's like trying to bring it together so you get the best of both worlds. At least for me, that's kind of been a big study for me.
Yeah. I think I was recently, if you want to follow me saying crazy shit, follow my Twitter. I'm just exploring a lot of these ideas, and I throw out things, and I distilled that down recently of like the idea of chaos and order, or progress and conservation. I was trying to understand that dichotomy, and what I came around to was the idea that the essence of healthy or proper or good conservation is hanging on to what works, what has a consistent track record of functionality. The essence of, and that's the order side of the yin yang, and the change or chaos side or progress side is constantly being open-minded and testing our assumptions about these things. Is it still true? Have circumstances changed? Is there a better way? And I liken it to the idea of the proper melding of those two is the conservation side says the wheel is a damn good invention. We probably shouldn't get rid of it. The progress side of things is saying, what if we made it out of wood instead of stone? Wait a minute. What if we made it out of rubber and filled it with air? That's taking the old and making it new again in a way that preserves its function. It's like, that just makes my heart sing, that finding those examples of the proper melding of progress and tradition, say.
It does for me too. I like the way you put that. It makes your heart sing. It just like resonates with all kinds of parts of you. You know, you're like, oh, my mind likes it. I like it emotionally. It feels good. It's useful. I dig that stuff too. Yeah. Yeah. Especially when you get that proper combination of form and function. Like, it's not only is it beautiful, it works. And it's like, oh, that's perfection right there. And speaking of resonance, that's how I do the dream thing. So we're gonna get into that. I always like to give people plenty of time to introduce themselves, and that's I didn't used to do this, but I find that's a really good way to get a little more perspective on, okay, who is this person now? Let's hear the experience they had in their dreams, and it'll relate to a little bit more of what. So I'm spending more time listening to who people are and what they say about themselves. Resonance. As we go through the process, if I make suggestions, they don't resonate, I rattled the wrong doorknob. I was saying this before off the air. But if you have those moments, cut me off and say, whoa, right there, that's something. And because I want to stop. I'm just rambling to inspire that moment in people. So that's the idea. So as per my usual process, I'm just going to shut up and listen. Our friend Todd's going to tell us about the dream he had, and we're going to see if we can figure out what the heck is going on. Okay. Yeah. Well, the dream was a couple years ago, and it was pretty interesting. It's still like embossed in my mind. You know, it's really got some interesting clarity for me. But I found myself in a high mountain range, and I live in Wyoming near Colorado there, and so I've seen lots of mountain ranges. And this one was very much what I saw in videos of the Himalayas, and so they were very different than the ones I've been around before. And I walked up to a big wooden structure, which I knew was a temple. And I knew it had to do with Buddhism and yoga and a lot of those kinds of ancient traditions. And I was looking at it, and it was warm, and everything behind me was cold and dark, but it was warm and welcoming. And I thought, oh, I get to do this again. This will be great. And so I was going to go in, and I could hear kind of everyone inside having a great time, and I could smell the food they were eating, and there were lamps, and it was lit up. And I was about to go in, and I was like, wait a second. I've already done this. I've already done everything I need to do here. I know what the acolytes do. I know what the masters are doing. I know what the abbot does. This isn't something I need to do again. I've already accomplished everything here for me. And I had this tremendous sense of grief and loss. I was like, oh, but this is great. I've done this and I want to do this some more. But it was like some part of me was not that, it was just not going to let me go back. And so I eventually turned around and left and woke up from the dream. But when I was looking, I could almost like see through the wood at the opening, and I could see the monks inside, and some meditating, some doing work with bells, some chanting, some cooks, people doing some interesting kind of acrobatics, different things like that. And I could see that the whole place went deep into the mountain, went all the way in, and it was huge. But on the outside, it looked small, like just a little wooden structure with some windows and a big door. And I can't remember what color the door was now that I'm trying to describe it to you, but certainly there was a lot of wood there and windows, but it looked much smaller on the outside than I knew it was inside.
Okay.
I could smell the food cooked and the spices that they use in different kinds of food. What else? Yeah.
That was pretty much the full duration of the dream?
Yeah. It was pretty interesting.
For sure. Lots of great detail and experience with that. So as usual for me lately, I've filled an entire page so far. Yeah, I take chicken scratch notes. If anyone could, reverse the video and look at what I'm writing upside down, they couldn't read it anyway. I can barely read it. So that is the telling of the dream. And as I say to folks all the time, it doesn't have to last very long. It can take 90 seconds in the telling, and we can unpack it into an hour-long conversation super easy. So that's step one, listen. Step two, deep dive. We go back in, we have another look at it. I try and reference my notes to pull out some additional details. So at the very beginning, where were you, already standing in front of the door, so to speak?
At the very beginning, it was like I was just walking up to the door, but there was nothing before that. And there was no one at the door. There was no one standing there or anything like that.
Was it during that kind of approach moment that you also became aware of the setting, the mountains, Himalayas specifically?
Yeah. And I could feel the snow on my back and wind actually blowing left to right. And it was frigid. And it did feel like being high on a mountaintop, which I've done many times, being from around here. But yeah, that was an interesting feeling.
That is interesting too. So you were able to have in that moment of, this is very much realistic to my lived experience of being high on a mountain. Yeah.
Like the change in the air and the lack of oxygen almost, like it was familiar for sure. Both in this life and, the way I was dreaming it, it's pretty interesting.
For sure. And did you have any sense of yourself, how you were dressed or body motions? I don't know if you know what I'm kind of leaning into, just a sense of yourself in that environment, beyond sensations. But
yeah, I was warm. I felt the cold. I wasn't like freezing or anything. I certainly had the right clothing on, which now that I think about it was old. It wasn't like what I would wear now if I was going skiing in Colorado or something. It was definitely old and heavier and thick. Probably some hair. Yeah, some animal hair.
Like a fur coat style.
Yeah.
That is interesting. So this is how my process works, is like you did not include that specific detail until I really kind of asked you, well, what was there? And then an extra little epiphany on top of that. I had clothes on. Wait, they were old clothes. They were not modern mountaineering gear, not the, what do they call it? We have the, the Columbia brand, I think, here in Oregon. And it's very much the vinyl not vinyl, but synthetic textured and it's waterproof and whatnot. Now, this is old school stuff. So you are even approaching this place from, say, a perspective or embodying something that's even older, not older than the place you're going, older than not modern. It's more of a, there was an kind of an age of exploration where that clothing, it was more common. It was late 1700s, early 1800s when a lot of the, say, great explorers first went to these places and documented their trips. So there's something very iconic maybe about looking at approaching this experience from that perspective in a way.
Yeah.
I don't know what it means. I'm not asking you for an answer, but
no, it's cool. This is fun to do. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So, and you were definitely feeling, and you mentioned dark. So it was nighttime or just heavy cloud cover and snow?
Yeah, it was definitely nighttime,
Okay.
but there was also cover and snow and blowing snow. And it was very much dark though, except for the building itself. Right?
And that's interesting too. There's a lot of different ways to understand that perspective. I mean, do you have any strong associations with the nighttime specifically? Is that like your most creative time, or specific fears from childhood? Like the nighttime's always felt threatening. What do you think?
So both. I do most of my writing and the creation of my methods at night, and I used to stay up all night researching things, partly because I couldn't sleep because I was having so many health problems. So I'd be reading about how yoga masters worked with the liver 4,000 years ago. And so for me, that time has always worked really well, where the morning, it doesn't quite go as well. And I mentioned a little bit that I went through some trauma when I was a kid. And so I had fears at night when things were dark because it reminded me of being out of control a bit. This didn't feel like that. This was more like everything in front of me is warm and I understand it. And what's behind me is something I don't understand, but probably where I need to go,
Yeah, no, that's good too. That the, sorry for the moment of silence here.
Interesting how this opens up the dream for me more as we talk about it.
Yeah, for sure. These always seem like, in a way, I'm a little, remorseful, regretful that I help people understand their dreams because they seem so much more. Now, there's a positive and a negative to it. It is destroying the mystery. We are literally taking that awe out of it in one sense of like, this feels so mysterious and important. And then we find out why it is important and we solve the mystery, which is its own kind of satisfaction, but you have to destroy the mystery itself in order to get there. So I feel a little regretful about that. For all that, I think it's the useful and beneficial process altogether. But I'm conflicted on that score sometimes. I'm not going to stop what I'm doing, but
Well, I take it. I think it's cool to get into it.
Yeah, for sure. So that's what we're looking at too. So this is why I ask. Well, of course, why do you ask questions? Because you want to know and understand things better. But this is why I ask people about how things relate to them specifically, because there are dream books, websites, not, pointing fingers at anyone that'll say, oh, if it's nighttime, it means X. It always means X. It never means anything else. And it's like, it just, in my opinion, it doesn't work that way. It just can't. It's got to be personal. So it's interesting, and it brought out from you the volunteered information that this did not feel like threatening childhood, out of control danger in the nighttime. This was very much more a comfortable place. You were properly dressed for the environment. You weren't naked and shivering and freezing and crawling across the burning snow to get into this building to save yourself. You're ready for this experience, and you're in more of a environment in general. So your brain's saying, conceive of approaching this situation you're going to observe as if it were how you approach learning in general. The nights you spent reading documents, the creativity inspired at that hour, and how you've poured it out onto the page. All of that just in your description and the fact that it is night. Yeah. Oh, that's good stuff. So, So you remember kind of approaching, if I were to, is it, you said it looked like a very small building. If you had to give it a, 10 by 20 description, how would you describe the size of it?
Probably 8 feet high, 6 feet wide, maybe. So reasonably small entrance,
like almost tiny, like impossible to contain what it did. You got a very much Doctor Who TARDIS situation going on. It's a police box. No, it's a universe. It's a pocket dimension. That's something too. So there's this conception that the exterior is very much appears different than what it actually contains, in a sense. But I don't think can you think of a better way to describe that idea that seems like it feels right for the dream?
Seemed like purposely kind of hidden, like they built it that way. So you didn't know what you were coming up on unless you knew what was already behind it. And that's why I was partly into a mountain, to protect what they were doing from the outside world, I'd say. Yeah.
So this kind of, and the idea of being purposely hidden, it doesn't feel deceptive. I think that's the wrong word, but there is an aspect of deception. It's this idea that, what is it? It's almost a challenge to find out if the seeker is worthy. Are you going to take the book for its cover? Or are you going to look deeper? And if you do, you'll be rewarded by seeing what is within. Or you can be superficial and say, what is this tiny shack? This isn't what I'm looking for. And you move on without any investigation. There's some kind of element of that going on in this, I think. And the idea that, go ahead.
I think so too. I think you're right onto it. Yeah.
And the idea that has a protective element to it of like those who are, what is it like? You train someone in martial arts and you hope they don't abuse the power. And so there's senseis who are very much like, I'm not going to train you because you're an asshole and you just want to beat people up. And that's not what this is for. I'm not going to tolerate that in my class. So there's a protective element of saying you don't get to know these secrets because you can't handle it. You can't apply them properly, or you might misapply them maliciously. And so you don't, so you have those iconic test of the hero, so to speak, of are you worthy to pull the sword out of the stone? Very, very much in that vein. That's what comes to my mind. Anyway.
Well, it's interesting you brought that up because I was just talking to an old martial arts teacher of mine who's been doing it for years. And he's like, I finally got the right group of guys I can teach some of the deeper things. And I could hear the relief in his voice as he was kind of going through students, trying to find people he could trust some of the higher level methods to, So,
for sure. Yeah, you don't want to turn away people that are trying to say get healthy, or people who are, maybe they got the wrong motive initially, but you hope through the process they will develop and gain or become worthy of the deeper teachings. And there's something very satisfying for the teacher to say I have someone I can finally tell some of these things I know, because they're going to get it and they're going to use it properly. That's amazing. That is. I don't know that there's anything necessarily significant about the temple being made out of wood, very small, but made out of wood, other than as you mentioned originally, the iconic, this looks very Eastern Buddhist yoga style. So that may be just a visual cue to your mind to look at that type of hidden knowledge, that type of hidden wisdom. It very much was not the Parthenon in Greece. It very much wasn't a church. It very much wasn't, an academic place of modern. It wasn't a modern school, so to speak. It was very much this specific type of thing. So your brain's saying, definitely, you're approaching this hidden knowledge where you have to look deeper to it, and it's specifically in this kind of Eastern philosophical tradition. So it's kind of going to inform then what you see when you look inside. How did you ever open the door, or you said you had the idea of being able to just see through it? How did that kind of happen? Was it spontaneous, or did you say, I want to have an experience of I want to see inside, and suddenly you could? How did that happen?
You know, it's a bit like a digital model in my head. I mean, it wasn't digitized like a computer,
Yeah.
but it was like I was going to walk into the door and then I could see through everything, you know, and it was like I had almost that sort of omnipresent vision all at once because it happened all like instantaneously and quick. And I knew where everything was and what everyone was doing. As if I had almost built the place myself. Like I knew everything, like instantaneously what was going on.
So it had even like a strong familiarity to it. You said as if you'd built it yourself.
Yeah, very familiar.
And that's interesting too. That's what I was looking for as well. There was this momentary, fleeting even intent to approach, intent to enter. And then at that moment, your brain didn't even feel the need to say, yeah, and you walk in, let's put your hand on the doorknob, let's pull it open, let's walk through. It was just like, just the intent, the desire to see opened your eyes to be able to perceive everything. I think there's something, this goes back to maybe even your thing, this idea of conscious decision-making in your process is like, we have to decide we're going to make the attempt. We're going to try to understand. And very often that is rewarded by at least some new insight, some information we didn't have before that maybe we can make use of, but you don't look, you're not going to see anything. You keep your eyes closed on purpose. You blind yourself.
Right.
Yeah. So very much, that's kind of what I had the idea that is how you would respond, but I could have been very surprised. And it was like, no, this is where I start juggling things too. It's like, it means something different to say, I decided to look and then I saw, versus I didn't even think about seeing, I was spontaneously shown. There's a difference to those two things. Your brain's definitely going in that direction of conscious choice to investigate and revealed. So if you had to kind of place what you saw first and where, was that the experience, or was it more you saw everything all at once and just knew where everything was suddenly and it was all a jumble on top of itself? Was there a sequence of events? First you saw this, then you saw that.
Yeah, it was like all at once. And then in the dream, I was perceiving different things like boom, 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 just to help my consciousness understand it a bit, you know. Not exactly front to back, but almost more like the lowest initiates to the highest abbot and the different things, maybe in that order. But I got it all at once, and then I kind of analyzed it in the dream, I think, maybe something like that.
So there was even in your mind maybe a bit of a progression from you're seeing the low, as you said, the lowest to the highest in that way, the initiates, the beginnings of understanding, and very much the receptive student, and then moving up more towards the learned teacher style person. Where in that process did the acrobatic or yogic folks and the cooks come in, and like a central fire and the feasting? Kind of how did that play out as you started to identify elements?
Yeah, they were more on the periphery. So the acrobatic stuff, and the cooks were in the heart of the place, you know, because they kept the whole place warm. So they were cooking with the fire as well as keeping the building warm, you know, making tea for the people to drink, you know. The acrobatic stuff was more, I think, on the outside because they needed more space. So the rooms were bigger for them to do the things that they were doing.
This is the first time you mentioned the idea of rooms. It was not one large, vast open space. It was a little segregated or segmented.
Definitely, yeah.
So in this main central area was the cooks and the feasting and maybe laughter, I think you mentioned, or the feeling of happiness centered around that. How were the other areas kind of sectioned off? Where were they?
Yeah, so if you first walked in, there was a big hall where you could tell that they meditated, but they also put tables down to eat. And then if you went deeper into the hall, that's where the cooks were, kind of towards the lower level, but in the back of the main area. The abbot was definitely farther back and up. The gymnastic stuff would have been to my left and to my right. There were other rooms for like little meditations and medicine. There was a place for medicine. This stuff was like going farther back in the building. It was like the more protected the knowledge was, the farther back in the building was. And the higher that it was, like the higher spiritual stuff was higher up and farther back. So
Okay. I don't know why this came to mind, but as you were describing this physical layout, I was seeing in my mind a human body. I don't know if that resonates with you at all. And not just like individual physical people, but as if the, like the long central hall with the hearth and the gymnastics, and at the end, the wisdom, the abbots deeper inside. I don't know if that resonates with you at all, if that gives you a sudden moment, as I call it.
I read at one point some Tibetan teachers talking about how they would design buildings to teach about health in the body. So they would actually design it that way so that you knew what was in each room and you knew what you needed to do as a doctor, but rather than teaching through a book, they taught through the layout of the building and put different things in the different areas. So yeah, definitely.
That's exactly what came to my mind. And this is very interesting. So there's a separation of the environment as well. You've got this mountain, and it's high up as well. You had to get there first to even start looking in the right place. And that's before, when I was taking, I did Aikido for a while. They said becoming a black belt is becoming a serious beginner. Then the 8 stages of black belt. I never made it myself.
Yeah.
But that's very, that just, you got to climb that mountain to get to the point where now you're ready to start the real work. So it's this very small opening, and there's something about that, like the hidden, not constricted, but it's maybe even easy to miss. Like I say, if you were flying overhead, hurrying to get, so you'd never see it. You got to be there on the ground in person, and then you got to find the entrance. There's something in that as well, tickling my brain, that then opens this place that seems in some ways analogous to layout of the human body. And that might have been on your mind as well, that idea, and kind of laid out this building in front of you. Where were the medicine rooms, say? You mentioned that. Also in the back, even further beyond the meditating abbots, or?
Yeah, further in the back and a little bit. They might have been on the same kind of level, but definitely towards the back and above where the cooks were. And I suspect they needed the warmth from the cooks to do some of what they were making with the herbs and things like that.
Very much. Do you have any strong recollections of any specific behaviors any of the people were doing? The cook did something specific, a specific yoga pose over here, a specific attitude of or gestures of the teachers, and anything jump to mind in terms of specific bodily motions or behaviors?
Yeah, certainly in those acrobatic type rooms, there were people doing what you would think of as like traditional yoga postures and hatha yoga and those kinds of things. And those were more in the front. It was like, this is what you get first. And then as you went back, there was more acrobatic stuff, more flipping around. If you went past that, there were people levitating. And I think that was as far back as like the acrobatic stuff goes. Like, well, you got this, you can just float around, and you got the all that could be done with that. And the cook site, remember, huge cleavers, them chopping up vegetables, big vats of tea, like butter tea, which I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but they put butter in it to keep themselves warm up that high, and I can almost smell that. Yeah. The abbot was like at the top, and he wasn't like doing anything particular with his body. He was like, he'd done all that stuff, right? And now he was just making sure that everyone else got what they needed. And he could do all his work without even needing to change his body or take a meditation posture. It was like all within him at that point.
That is so very relaxed, almost Taoist type of act without acting situation. But his focus was this giving. He's there to impart. That's what from your description there. It's like that his entire purpose, but also the purpose you assigned to him in the dream as an icon of that type of things. Like, what does a teacher do? They teach. They give away as much of what they know as they can to be helpful and beneficial.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting too. But it's like you had to go there's repeated instances or tiny loops of progression through this thing. You've got to go inside from the outside. You got to climb the mountain to start the knowledge. You got to get inside from outside. You got to go through the levels of, first fill your belly, take care of your physical health in a way, keep yourself warm. So I'm getting a very Maslow's hierarchy type of thing. Take care of your physical needs first, then you can start. And in conjunction with that is your physical representations of the lower levels of the yogic practice. Getting to once you're ready for it, your body can handle it. And you can move up here, and you can get all the way to levitating if you want. You can superpowers through these things, but all of it kind of in service of this core idea of imparting wisdom, sharing. The Erickson idea of generativity comes to mind. Once you get to a certain point, you're not looking to conquer the world anymore. You're just trying to be useful to the people coming behind you. I don't know if you have anything to say on all that stuff.
Yeah, there was a sense of like evolution, like different levels of here's how you consciously evolve people, and so you need these things first. You can't skip the bottom and just go to the top. You had to like build it all the way up to get to the top, and then the abbot has gone as far as they could go, right? And so that was kind of the idea.
Yeah, and he seems very comfortable in that position too. He's not angry and stalking and pacing and lecturing. He's just chill. Like I got it. I got what you need. I'm here. Let's do the thing.
He's fully contained, right? And no one can perturb him. He's got it all down. He's got everything put together already, and so that gives him the ability to pass on to other people because he's already like, I've already done all these things. I know right where you are because I was there. Mm-hmm. I know what this is like because I did that, and that kind of.
That's a wonderful thing too. And I enjoy that myself, to be able to, and it's tough because you get, when I was your age. Okay. I get that feeling. Like I had people tell me that. I still have people tell me that. Hey, 80-year-olds when I was in my 40s, let me tell you. And I try to listen, but it can also be that, oh, sure, old man, you know everything, don't you? Well, let them do. I mean, there's no fool like an old fool, but you might want to listen just in case. I was going somewhere with that. Anyway. I did have a tangential thought of the idea of, did anyone give any indication that they saw or knew that you were there?
No, not at all.
Everyone's doing their own thing and you're just observing.
Right.
Something in there too.
And it's interesting as we talk about it, because it was like I got all that knowledge at once, and as we pull it apart, it's like all that knowledge was stacked in one place in my memory. And I think it was meant to be that, like, there's some feeling I have that like this is all familiar all at once. Boom, done.
Yeah. You had a very, I want to say, tightly packed preconception in a way. And a lot of people look at the idea of a preconception and say you should get rid of your preconceptions if you're questioning, if you're looking for answers. But we carry a lot of stuff with us. We have our idea of what a cup is, what it does. That's a packaged preconception. We can put water in it. We don't want to spill it. It's used in ceremonies. All of these things are stacked on top of a cup. And so you're bringing your overview of this, your experience of research into mystic traditions and ancient learnings, and it's all in this. Bam! This is what it is, and then it's interesting too to say that you, and that's why I asked this. It would maybe be a different something if by the time you saw the abbot, he looked at you and winked or something. I mean, that would mean something else. There's no interaction with this whatsoever. You're completely observing it from the outside, literally in the dream sense, but also holding out this idea from your own mind and getting a look at it, getting a look inside it and all of its component elements. Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I don't know if I was going somewhere with this. Sometimes I just try and describe things 10 different ways or get a really good description of it. And then we just let it sit there. We'll see what happens.
And it's interesting because all of it was completely familiar to it. There was no part of it that I was like, man, I've already done this. That was the feeling I had. I've already done all of this.
Yeah. That's something unique too. The idea that there was nothing surprising. There was no room with a hidden door, where you were looked at it and you're like, there's something I haven't explored yet. What is that? I don't know what's in there. Everything is fully on display.
Oops. Sorry about that.
Perfectly fine. We got sleeping cats here. Hi, baby. Sometimes they fight with each other and run around in the middle of stuff. Where was I going with that? So yeah, so there's this fully encapsulated and in familiar, well-tread ground. Like, you've been in this temple, you've learned everything you can from there. There's nothing new to experience. There's no reason to go in. There's not going to serve for you a useful purpose. And that's where you got down to the idea at the end. Well, do we go to the end? Where's my notes? Chicken scratch. You very much described the idea that why did I write unable? Oh, so you realize I've already done all this. I am well familiar with this environment, what it has to offer, what it contains. And there was this sense of grief, you said. Can you say a little bit more about that, maybe?
Yeah, it was like their sense of grief or loss, because I wanted to go back, but I knew that there was nothing left for me. It would be like a regression, that there was a sense of I needed to move to the next big thing, which was something on my own in the dark. Not that I wasn't ready for it, because I had all the right stuff to do it. It's just like the camaraderie and the eating of the food, and then being with people that are doing what you're doing and talking to the abbot. You're like, I've already been the abbot. There's nothing for me to talk to the abbot about, right? It's time to do something else. And if I were to do it, it would be grief, it wouldn't be the right thing.
Did you have that impression, what you just said, I've been the abbot? Did that occur to you in the dream? That was a kind of a thought you had of like, I've actually been to the highest position within this environment I could possibly be. I've been the teacher. What more is there for me to learn here?
It was exactly that. It was like, I've been everything here. I've been the cooks. I've been these guys levitating. I've been the people teaching. There were, I think, kids there. I've been the guy teaching the kids. I've been teaching people to meditate. I've been the medicine guys. I've done that. I've made the butter tea. I've, that kind of, I've done all these things. I'm like, I've already done this, right? And so there's nothing more for me to do there. But there was a sense of loss to that. It was like, oh,
yeah,
that kind of thing.
That is that bittersweet type of thing. It's like coming to the end of a long television series, multiple seasons, and it's the finale. It's the final goodbye. It's the end of the book. It's the last page, and you can never experience it again for the first time. That kills me sometimes. Things I've seen where I'm like, if I could erase my memory and do this all over again, that would be amazing. I would do it on purpose, but we can't, and so we kind of accept that. Yeah, it's one of those. Yeah, it's that acceptance that it. Like if you could hang on to the fantasy, you wouldn't have to experience the grief. And I think that's what drives a lot of people to ignore problems, unfortunately, is, if I don't have to confront that this is a problem, then I don't have to feel bad about it or my responsibility for it or accept the grief of loss. This is gone forever. So yeah, this, and once you had that kind of realization, the immediate thought that followed upon it was that, if there's nothing here for me, you didn't just say, well, I might as well throw myself off a cliff. It wasn't like this is the end. It's like I'm done with this part of my journey now, but now back out into the dark that's very iconic too. This feeling of you mourn a loss and you have to choose a new path, or you have to decide, am I going to choose a new path? And it's that's very difficult for some people to let go of what they were, what they experienced, and get ourselves reoriented. Well, what do I want now? What's the right thing to do? And in the sense of that, did you have an idea of where you were going, or did you have an experience in the dream of turning around to face a new direction and starting on a path? Or did the dream just kind of end with you having that realization?
No, there was definitely a sense of what I was meant to do next. Like life had set me up to do the next thing, and I needed to be the next person to create the next iteration of the evolution that the temple was there to build in people. And then there was like an accomplishment there, and then there was the next step, and I was the person to go do that on my own, somewhere else. And it wasn't like I was terrified of that. It was like, okay, I gotta go do this thing that I alone can do. No one else can do it with me. I'll be off a bit in the cold, but I'm ready for it. And I definitely turned back and started moving behind me, but it wasn't like I saw anything back there. That was just right when I woke up, and it became a little black. But
gotcha. So actually, the dream itself faded to black, faded out into the darkness, the unknown, and you didn't have a sense of specifically what you were supposed to do, just that there was something. You actually kind of knew it, even if you can't, even if that a description of it is not in your mind at that moment.
Yeah, I mean, I knew some of it was like I needed to teach something bigger that I had inside me at that point. I'd already mapped it all out and figured it all out. And then it was like, okay, now's the time to go do this thing rather than go back to what you've already done, which feels safe, right? And so there's a sense of just adventure.
It certainly does.
Yeah.
Are you working on a new book or a new, that came to my mind. And so you're in the process of writing something new, creating something new, sharing new wisdom.
Yeah, very much so.
We got the puppy. He wants down. Say hi, Peanut Butter. Dude, a peanut butter. He's a shaggy boy because it's winter. Go ahead. I feel like I interrupted you. What? How did this dream come about? Maybe in relation to that, if you feel there's a connection, or
yeah, this one was before the last book I just published, which was a big step for me. So the first one I wrote was kind of my step into teaching things. It had a lot to do with diet and mindset and emotional connection to diet, to break it down, to help people improve their health and, get around the crazy fad diets and things like that. So that was my step into it. Right. And then my second one was a huge jump into like big principles for life. And so this dream was before that one, although what I'm working on now is a step up from that, and each one is like pushing my boundaries a little bit about how far I want to go, because
I forgot you said this was 2 years ago. Yeah. So I kind of hit on something like the idea that, well, because I listened beforehand and you've, published material. Some people just do a system. Some people write it into a book, as you did. This very much felt to me like the end of one chapter of your life. I've researched that as much as I can. I've drawn everything I can from it. Now I've got to challenge myself to face the unknown and move forward. And this dream was actually before you started that work, or you were contemplating beginning that work, or you had come to the end of an investigation, you didn't know where to go next.
Yeah, so it was in the middle of writing that book, and I got 3 other manuscripts. So I'm trying to figure out what order to publish them to get the most help to the people that I could. So that one I was like, I'll make it book 4 or 5 so I can ladder it up so people, it doesn't go as heavy. And I was like, no, let's do this now and let's hit it. And so there was certainly a feeling within me that's like, okay, now it's time to move into these things, almost like a life pushing me, into something new. That's the feeling in the dream,
For sure.
Yeah.
Very much in like a self-reflection, an understanding of let's find out where we are and what we should do next based on what has gone before and where we're at currently in this kind of process. I'm getting that very strongly. And I don't know if it didn't seem to be a surprise to you in the dream. It seemed like everything had that kind of familiarity and a bittersweet loss at the end and a final goodbye to old friends type of feel.
Yeah, it was a lot of that. And I remember thinking in the dream, I was like, I've already spent thousands of lifetimes doing this thing in the temple, right? Now I've got it all. I'm pregnant with what I need to do next. Let's go do that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we could consider that the entirety of the understanding. I mean, that seems like a very neat package. And I'm not saying that like, but wait, there's more. I'm saying there may be, not the more. There may be more. There may be some. That's what I was trying to pick out here. If there was any little individual. Well, I guess I should ask you any surprising images, understanding from our deep dive that you hadn't considered from that perspective before. Like it wasn't obvious at the time. Does anything come to mind?
What comes to mind with that is it's like I had a hologram, and so I understood it all at once on some level. And as we break it through, we're like going through the little pieces of the hologram to see all the things that I knew, but didn't consciously flush out after I had the dream, you know? And so there's a real interesting sense of that for me. It just like, oh, that was all there, you know, but an interesting feeling that goes with it. You know?
Yeah, for sure. And that's why I spent a little bit of time unpacking the idea of unpacking an idea, because we got those very condensed things that are just like packed, really, you know, there's too many shirts in the luggage type of thing. You open it up, they all spring out. Coiled spring is very much like it too. That's if you open the can, you're gonna get the, you know, snakes out of the peanut brittle.
Oh, right, yeah.
Right. It may not be the right analogy, but that potential energy is what I'm going for too. It's like, and that's the more densely packed something is, the more full of vitality it is in that sense. Was this period of life when you was it your second book that was kind of nailing down the 26 principles, or had that come before?
No, I wrote those specifically for that book. And so I actually have a bunch of systems that I use with different principles. And so the first two books went off the first set of principles I have. Now I have 15 with different levels in them. And so that was like a bit of taking that and then putting it into a specific decision-making tree. But the main system that I was working on had 18 principles. And so that whole book is kind of rich with a lot of things. And one of the things I would mention is when I was writing that book, I was really sick. And so I had these surgical infections, and I wasn't sure that I was going to make it through some of that. And I was like, if I had to make a big shot to get as much of this out in a big way as I could, that's kind of a lot of the focus of what that book was. But now I've gotten through all that, and I'm much better. And so now I can break it up into all these different pieces. But there was a shot, like if I got to make a Hail Mary, get the biggest things out of, like, in a big context that I could. So I made the book really thick with principles and information. So much so I think people are like, man, there's so much in here, you know, what do I do with it now?
For sure.
Like, well, if I don't make it, I'll get it out there, and I'll feel better on some level that I got it out of my heart and head into the world somewhere.
That you enacted the role of the teacher, and you know, for better or worse, nobody reads it. You did the thing. You made your best attempt to share that, and it's very interesting too. Is you know, hearing that and knowing the process you were in as well. This experience of approaching to have a look back inside everything you've researched and know. Realize you've been the abbot, realize you are still the abbot, and you're taking it all with you into the dark. There's nothing more for you to learn there. You're not leaving anything behind. It's actually all coming with you, and then pouring out on the pages, you know, in this new form.
Yeah,
very much all of that is happening in the dream, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
sounds reasonable.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. Resonates, as we were talking about before.
Yeah, for sure. It's got to make sense. Like I always tell folks out there, if I say something stupid or way off track and you're like, no, that's not it, you're right. If you don't feel it, you don't feel it. And this is a difference too in like the Freudian approach back in the day, and even maybe today, not to knock on psychoanalysis, it has its benefits in the dream. But if I made a suggestion that I think is logical and you say, no, I don't think so, now in the Freudian brain, you got to say, is this just your resistance? Maybe I am correct. Maybe I'm not. I like to go with what people feel. So this is my intuitive approach.
Cool.
And they are the pluses and minuses.
Definitely. Yeah.
Well, any other element of the dream that seems mysterious, that remains unexplained, like, you know, that little thing, I wonder why that was there. I don't know that it's necessary, say, specifically to say, why did they have a cleaver instead of a knife, butcher knife? You know, I don't know that level of detail is necessary. Maybe it is. Maybe cleavers mean something to you. Maybe they don't. But any specific things like that remain mysterious that you want to pick apart?
Not really. I mean,
Nothing
the
comes
cleaver
to mind.
seems that you said that, but the cleaver just seems more functional because it's so big. They had so many people to cook for. Like, well,
for sure. And
we'll get through these quicker, right?
And there's also something iconically Eastern cooking about a cleaver. You see a lot of people even just using it to chop up onions. I mean, butcher knife is more of a Western or American thing. You'll see cleavers all over the East. So that may have just been, you know, like in like the vat. You're not going to see that in most American homes, but in this setting, it makes sense. So some of those things I gloss over, I don't know if the last thing that maybe I thought was interesting is the style of dress, the more, early 19th century, hobbyist explorer style of mountaineering gear. And you've been mountaineering before. So why does anything come to mind when you think about why did you put yourself in an older style of dress versus a more modern get up? I don't know a better way to say it. Anything come to your mind on that?
I get the sense from that it was meant to be a representation of lots of time having been spent on this in the past, and so there's a lot of ancient stuff there. There's a lot of, like I mentioned, like this feeling of lifetimes working on something, rather than this was something I did last week in my cool snowboarding gear or something. Had a bit more of that feel. And it does kind of remind me of like what Sherpas wear, like if you see pictures of that, more along some of those lines. Although now that we're mentioning it, interestingly, one of the things is everyone there wasn't Asian. I mean, there were different races of people doing all the things in the building, which was interesting too.
Gotcha. Mixed bag. So that lays your modern experience of a, say, multi-ethnic or multiracial investment in these disciplines on top of the traditional form that they were presented in and still remain in despite modern, what's the word of, trappings or superficial appearance. What is it? We don't have many shrine, temple, pagoda style martial arts studios. It's at the strip mall and it's just in a building. Right. It is what it is. That's where they could get the space and where they teach you. So there's, I was going somewhere with that. That happens all the time. I think I made my point and then I forget what my point was. Well, yeah, I mean, these, so we're heading for about an hour long. These things don't have to take forever. Sometimes it's really, we get to the broad overview and the specifics very, very quickly. Sometimes it takes longer, but we don't have to keep rambling for no reason. If you feel like you've gotten a pretty satisfactory understanding of why that experience happened and what it meant to you at the time.
Yeah, it's helpful. And it's helpful to me now because the book I'm working on is a pretty large step up from the last one. And I'm a little like, do I really want to teach this stuff and see where it goes? Because, it's just interesting to go deeper into some of the meditation processes that I've made and some of the ways of working with the nervous system and triggering neurotransmitters and some of the things that I want to get out there now, and so I'm writing it. I'm like, do I want to go this far? And I do. And I feel this hesitation, almost like, I got to turn around and go back this way with the book I'm working on now. So the timing of this is really helpful for me and what I'm doing now.
Very cool. Yeah. And I mean, it looks at kind of your, at least 2 years ago, what was your thought process about where you were at that moment and what you were trying to accomplish? I mean, where were you going in the dark? Where were you turning around to leave and take this information? And that idea that you got this, you knew in the dream, you didn't wake up the dream terrified. I'm going into the unknown. There's a cliff. I can't see. I'm blinded by the snow. You're panicking. You're like, almost enthusiastic, but not an excited enthusiasm, but a confidence. The dream ended with this, I can do this. This is, I'm rambling again. All those synonyms.
No, it's helpful because it does speak to where I'm at now too. It's like, I have these things that I think are just a treasure that I want to give to everybody. And I'm like hesitant to do it because I almost feel arrogant and I almost feel like egotistical. I'm like, here are these cool things. I made most of them. There are close to some of the things I've learned from different teachers, but it's definitely my own thing. And I want to put it out there and get it to people because it was so powerful for me. And then I'm like, I'll go do it. Then I'm like, wait a second. Am I being egotistical here? What am I going to show people, And I'm like, no, this thing really, really works. And I know it really, really works. I don't have any doubt about that. But it's an interesting kind of step up to get myself to do it. So.
That is interesting too. I try and be, as much as I say I'm a wizard and all that good stuff. And I'm what am I doing? I'm putting myself on YouTube for people to critique and say he's terrible at what he does and all that stuff. And so I try to maintain like enough confidence to say, I think I got something to share, and enough humility to say, it is what it is. I'm just a guy doing a thing. Maybe I know something, maybe I don't. That's a tough balance sometimes too. You gotta have enough confidence to put yourself out there, but not enough that you think you're the only one who knows what you're doing. Which is kind of where I'm coming from with the reproductions of historical literature. So what do you do when you go to school? They show you all these people who wrote about the stuff you're studying before you and already came up with all these other ideas and how those ideas evolved and condensed and built on one another. Well, I never had this education in dreams before, in the history of historical dream literature. So what am I doing? I'm teaching myself. And at the same time, sharing it with the audience. Here's a book I read in a new form, nice and pretty, try to keep the cost down. And I'm trying to do that. That's my humility side of, I better learn what other great thinkers have already thought about the subject and how it evolved to where it is today before I even think about writing my own book. I gotta go study in the temple first. That's what I'm doing with my republications. At the same time, sharing it with the audience like this. You want to be, as good as me or understand everything I know. Read the books. They're all out there. I made them for you. So, but speaking of which, what, maybe mention your, titles and I can throw those in the description too. What was, your first book, second book,
Oh, yeah. The first book was called Food, Why Do You Trouble Me So Much? And then the second one is Brain, Why Do You Trouble Me So Much? And I'm not quite sure what I'll name the third one, but it'll probably be along those lines just to brand it. But the titles still make me laugh when I look at it. I like pick up my own book and I'm like, oh, I love the title, and it just
you gotta love it.
Cracks me up.
And I get the sense it means something. It's like, is that kind of I can see a very Eastern mystic, saying that type of phrase. I mean, what is it? What comes to mind when you think of the title and how it's expressed? Is it based on another quote?
No, it just came up in my mind one night when I was writing books. I was like, I just wrote it down without thinking about it much. Food, why do you trouble me so much? And I think that was part of the ideas that got me into those books because I was trying to solve the problems that I was having at the time. And then all the things that I had learned got applied to it, and so it became an answer to those questions. And so it just made sense to put that in the title, although it's long and hard to type out sometimes. But
can be, yeah. Wait, Is there an apostrophe? Is that a comma? Is it with one H or two? So sometimes.
Exactly, yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, well, those, and actually probably the best place is to make sure people know you are Todd Nyholm, Nyholm, but they can find you at Nitality.com, Nytality, Nitality.com. You're also on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, the creator of the Healthy Life Ladder, 26 Principles to Achieve More Conscious Decision Making. Wow. Cool. There you go. That's the particulars. I like to make sure I mention that at the beginning and the end. So
I appreciate it. Yeah. It's interesting trying to get attention on things that you think are really cool that you want to share with people, so we can do that for each other, help people get what they're looking for.
I'm getting the same thing with some of these older dream books. I've never heard of it before. No one's ever mentioned it. It was not in the top of pop culture. It wasn't even in my psych classes, history and systems. I'd never before seen. Luckily, a lot of them archived, and I've been rediscovering them. That's a fantastic journey for me too. But we're a little bit over an hour, and I think we've reached the end of our journey today. That's probably good enough for both of us, huh?
Great. It was fun to do and really useful for me too. So I appreciate it.
Yeah. I appreciate you being here once again. Todd Nyholm out of Wyoming. I need to get over and see Wyoming one of these days. Lots of beautiful landscape.
Definitely. A lot of beautiful things. Yeah.
Yeah. Some nice wood cabin there. I love that.
Yeah. I'm in the cabin, just me and the dog, and got a little land, which is quiet. Like you were mentioning in the beginning, helps you think and work on things.
You need it. You need that space to let your thoughts settle into the proper place. Well, I think I never know how to end these things. I've done it better and worse on different occasions. But my final thing I'll say to folks is, hey, please stop what you're doing. Like, share, subscribe, tell your friends. Always need more volunteer dreamers. Get a t-shirt, coffee mug, support my work. 12 books of historical dream literature. I think I plugged them enough during this episode. And I think the last thing to say is just thanks to Todd. And hey, everybody out there, thanks for listening.
Thanks for having me.